It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Hello there. Welcome to another brand new edition of Rico Brogna, an edition of the Rico Brogna where we can officially say Juan Soto is a New York Met. He put the jersey on. He put the 22 on. He put the beautiful blue Mets baseball cap on, and he answered questions for the very first time as a New York Met. We'll spend some time talking about the press conference from Thursday. We will also listen to more of David Stearns. David Stearns did multiple media sessions throughout the winter meetings, talked about a variety of topics. And on the last edition of the Rico, we went through a lot of what he said from day one of the winter meetings. We will go through a lot of what he said in day two of the winter meetings, and we'll respond. We'll give you analysis. So you'll hear David Stearns if you missed it. You probably did. And you'll hear our analysis. As far as Juan Soto is concerned, there is something cool about a press conference. You know, I was explaining this briefly on the air on Evan and Tiki before we aired the press conference. To me, and maybe it's because I'm a weird guy, there are four lines of demarcation where I get excited about a new acquisition. There's the initial shock, the initial announcement, whether it's a tweet, or it's your dad calling you on the phone, or your friend texting you, that initial announcement that you got a player. We all experienced that together on a live Rico Brogna. If you missed that, download that in the archives on Sunday night, where it was me, it was Hoff, it was Sal Licata, it was positive Tommy Lugauer. We were all together talking Met baseball, and then boom, tweet comes out, Juan Soto picks the New York Mets. Maybe you out there experienced that first step with all of us. So that's step one. And that is damn exciting. Like finding out you acquired a player. Step two is what we experienced on Thursday, the press conference. There's something kind of cool about the press conference. You put that jersey on. It's always very awkward. The player talks about how excited he is to be with the organization. They talk glowingly about the future, blah, 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 blah. But it is very exciting. Day three, and Tiki gave me crap for this one, but we'll do this again in a few months and you'll hear me get excited. Day three is the first time you actually see that player play for you in an exhibition game. I remember Johan Santana making his first start for the Mets in Port St. Lucie, Florida, in spring training, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Like, damn, man, Johan Santana is a Met. Even if it's a spring training game, even if it doesn't count, seeing him in a uniform, number 57, and pitching in Johan's windup is very cool. And we see that with Juan Soto in spring training of 2025. That's number three. And then number four is opening day. Same thing as number three, except it counts. Those are the four lines of excitement. So today or Thursday, depending on when you're listening, that was number two, that introductory press conference. And before Juan Soto said anything, I said this on the radio too, there was nothing he was going to say, good or bad, that was going to change my excitement. You know, you could have the greatest press conference in the world by saying what? I love the organization. I'm happy to be here. Or coming clean and saying I came here for the money. It doesn't matter. To me, it's Juan Soto's a New York Met. That's freaking cool. During the press conference, I thought Juan Soto basically hit everything you'd expect him to hit. The money's nice, but I came here for family. I came here because of the vision that Steve Cohen has, the vision that Alex Cohen has, how they treat the families, all that great stuff. But I want everybody to be honest with themselves. Juan Soto is a Met, so we're excited, and we ate up everything he said. Isn't it great that the Mets treat families well? Isn't it great that Steve Cohen has this awesome vision? Isn't it great that David Stearns is a guy he trusts? If a player leaves us and goes to any other organization and says the exact same stuff, we curse them out. And we say, what a liar and what a fraud. And if you don't believe me, go back and listen to what 80% of Met fans said when they eavesdropped on Jacob deGrom's press conference upon signing with the Texas Rangers. Or even go back and look at old tweets, which is always a fun thing to do. So I get, in this case, we are all just fanboys and fangirls. No matter what Juan Soto says, we eat it up. And we ate it up. He loves the culture. He loves the ownership. He loves the locker room. He loves everything. And I can't wait to see this guy play baseball. I thought where the Mets failed, and they've been doing this a lot over the last few years, I'm not sure why, is their press conferences tend to be short. And the only reason that bothers me is there's a lot of questions I wish were asked. Like I give you one right off the top of my head, and this did not hit me yesterday or the day before because I would have talked about it on the Rico Brogna, but I'd bring it up right now. And that is something that I never really thought about until I was trolled. Keith Hernandez has said a lot of really good things about Juan Soto. There's a clip that I had cut to play on our show on WFAN about how Keith had said Juan Soto is such a good hitter, he may work until he's 80 so he can watch his entire career. And it's cool thinking back and seeing a clip like that because now you know Keith Hernandez gets to call Juan Soto every day. And maybe we can hold Keith Hernandez to it. He says he wants to work till he's 80. Okay, we're going to hold you to it. But Keith Hernandez made an observation during the Subway Series last year that I think is worthy of discussing before we get to a lot of what David Stearns has said over the last few days in analyzing. If you look at the dimensions of Citi Field and how deep right field is, Juan Soto had a play in the Subway Series this past year on a ball that went over his head. And Keith Hernandez very quickly jumped in and said, why are the Yankees playing him in right field in this ballpark? This is not exactly ideal for Juan Soto because of the dimensions of right field at Citi, especially if you compare it to the dimensions at Yankee Stadium. And it's really true. I mean, you look at the dimensions of Citi Field and you compare, let's just say, left center field to right center field, you see a significant difference. And Soto is the kind of player who throughout his major league career has bounced between left field and right field. He's basically played an even amount of games in left and right. Obviously, he played right field at Yankee Stadium. A part of that is right field is a smaller outfield to run down at Yankee Stadium. But let's think about our dimensions. Left center field is 358. Right center field is 375. That's a 17-foot difference. Deep right center field is an ungodly 398. Deep left center field is 385. So left field, whether it's left center or deep left center, is significantly shorter in terms of running a fly ball down than right field is. So it's a geeky question, but hey, Juan Soto, do you have a preference between right field and left field? You've basically split your career at the two positions. You came up as a left fielder with Washington. You moved to right field after Harper left. You get traded to San Diego. You play left field. Then you move to right field. Then you come to Yankee Stadium. They move you to right field. It made a lot of sense. Alex Verdugo's acquired. He's naturally a left fielder and a really good one defensively. So it made sense for the Yankees to play you in right field. What about Citi Field? And that's a good question for David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza as well. A couple of quick positives and negatives. The negative is Brandon Nimmo's arm. Let's just admit that. Brandon Nimmo does not exactly have the greatest arm, and now you're putting him in a spot in right field, which is more known for having a better throwing arm. Juan Soto, for all the crap he gets defensively, actually has a really good arm. But if you're concerned about range, if you're concerned about outfield speed, if you're concerned about running down a ball in the gap of right center field versus left center field, I don't think there's any question that left field is probably better equipped for Juan Soto than right field is. So we'll see if the Mets make any thought on maybe flipping him and if Soto has a preference. We know he has a preference for 22 because he got that bad boy written into his contract. And I'd love that question. Hey, did you even call Brett Beatty? Did you negotiate with Brett Beatty? Or was this one of those Steve Cohen said, hey, listen, Brett, you'd be lucky if you're on this team next year, so we're just going to take 22 away from you. But obviously more details on the decision. But the press conference was very quick. And the Mets, like I mentioned, have done this a lot where they basically let 7 or 8 questions be asked, and then it's over. And then, Soto does his one-on-ones, what have you, or meets with the print media and the news media, whatever. So I did feel like there was more to be asked, and maybe we'll get that as time goes on and they report to spring training. But it was cool to see. It was definitely surreal. But, and maybe this is normal, what I'm about to say. I think back to all the moments we've had as fans in 2024. The moments of Francisco Lindor's game 161 home run, the moments of the playoffs against the Brewers, and then Philadelphia, and then Los Angeles. As excited as I am for the signing of Juan Soto, which you may have heard or seen live when we did that Rico, those moments were bigger. Like, this moment may end up being bigger because you acquire this great player for the next 15 years, and the impact will certainly be bigger. The Mets had a fun season that ended in the National League Championship Series. They didn't win a World Series, but I think to the feeling I had when Alonso hit that opposite field home run, that feeling I had when Lindor hit that grand slam, that amazing just rush that you get as a fan, as excited as I was for signing Soto, as cool as it was watching the press conference on Thursday, the in-the-moment feel is not even close. But I understand. We're doing a Rico Brogna, God willing, 20 years from now, and we're talking about greatest moments in Met history. Sure, you may say the acquisition of Juan Soto turned out to be one of the great moments in Met history. But as far as how you feel as something is happening, those playoff moments, they made my spine tingle, to say the least. Anything you wanted to hear from Soto Hoff in this press conference that you didn't get to hear?
No, for me, I think I was pretty solid with everything.
I think we lost Pete's mic. You want to try again? At least you're not burping into the mic or farting into the mic like the past, so that's good.
For the people, there's some kinks I got to work out, so I apologize. And I'm also trying to frame myself properly. We're doing the new frame thing. So actually, the one thing I actually was very happy with, hello, that's not the one I want. It's not the one I want. That's not the one I want either.
Yeah, just talk, because most people don't care how we look, all right? They're watching on YouTube. Most people listen on the podcast, so just finish. What did you want to hear from Juan Soto?
Well, I'm happy that we didn't hear about a lot of Yankee stuff. Like, I mean, listen, we heard that he didn't speak to the Yankees. We didn't hear that he didn't speak to Aaron Judge at all. But this was a day where conversation on the BT and South show started out where it's like, there's going to be a lot of Yankee questions. And I'm a Mets fan. I don't give a flying F. I want to hear about him being with the Mets, being with this franchise, choosing this team, and what it's going to take to win a championship. And I got that. And I felt great.
So here's what's so unique about this. When DeGrom signs with Texas, I'll use him as a great example. The people in Dallas didn't want to hear about his decision to leave the New York Mets. It's like when we sign a free agent, you don't want to hear about one's decision to leave another team. But this whole thing is unique because you're talking about one city and a player that went from one team to the other. So I share your thought. I think most Met fans didn't necessarily need to hear a breakdown of what went wrong with the New York Yankees or why he left the New York Yankees, other than you wanting to bust your friend's balls and say, see, he likes the Mets better. He likes our vibe better. Other than the ball-busting part of being a fan, we don't care why a guy leaves. And think about it in terms of other cities. No one cares why. I know Lindor was a trade, but what happened that caused the breakup between Francisco Lindor and Cleveland? Nobody cared about Max Scherzer or Justin Verlander leaving Houston. But it's unique. I mean, it's a New York thing. I think that's a part of the story. Steve Cohen tried to downplay that when it was asked of him, hey, is it extra sweeter because you took him away from the New York Yankees? This is not, as much as Met fans want Steve Cohen to be George Steinbrenner, here's where he's not George Steinbrenner. George Steinbrenner hated the Mets. George Steinbrenner wanted to collect old 86 Mets like it was a toy, and he wanted to stick it to the Mets. There is zero indication that Steve Cohen is trying to stick it to the New York Yankees. Juan Soto has been identified for years as the premier free agent that you want to target. In 2020 and in 2021, you looked ahead and said, holy mackerel, this guy's only going to be 26 years old as a free agent. Go sign him. He just so happened to be a New York Yankee because the Yankees, to their credit, went out and traded for him a year ago. And I believed Steve when he was asked point blank, hey, is it extra sweeter taking him away from the Yankees? And Cohen was like, no, and said, look, there are going to be battles we're going to have where they're going to take someone from us, or we're going to battle for the same player, and they're going to end up with the player. And he's probably right. Because while Steve Cohen spends money, and he spent a lot to get Juan Soto, I don't think it's infinite. And I think there are going to be moments where we're going to battle for free agent, and we're not necessarily going to get the player. That's why when I hear the George comparisons, I get it in terms of, loving his team and doing whatever it takes to win like that. Those are attributes that I think he shares, but he doesn't share the attribute of trying to stick it to the other team. Well, I think that's a fallacy that we try to convince ourselves of.
If that's the case, Luis Severino, Frankie Montas, Clay Holmes, you don't think there's a little bit of Mendoza being like, those guys can work, and let's make them work and shove it up the Yankees, what?
Absolutely zero. If you think the New York Mets signed Frankie Montas to stick it to the New York Yankees, you lost your mind. Even Clay Holmes. I think where the Yankee connection comes from is the familiarity that Carlos Mendoza has with a lot of players. I think that Carlos Mendoza coaching a lot of these guys, obviously as the bench coach under Aaron Boone, brings him an experience. I think what it actually shows you is that Mendy's got a lot to say, and David Stearns likes to listen to him in terms of player acquisitions. They were also interested in Jonathan Loaisiga, who they didn't end up with. The Yankees ended up re-signing him. That is not the same at all as what George Steinbrenner tried to do. He wanted to stick it to the Yankees. There's no sticking involved. You don't sign Luis Severino to stick it to the Yankees. Frankie Montas to stick it to the Yankees. Harrison Bader to stick it to the Yankees. I mean, come on. No, not at all. Again, I think it's something you want to be true or you want to have be true, and it's not. I don't think there's any indication that Cohen is trying to stick it to anybody. Juan Soto just happened to be this generational opportunity, and to his credit, he took advantage of it.
Well, and here's the other thing about Juan Soto is from day one, he made it clear he was hitting free agency. He was going to go for big money. So it's not like anybody was like, oh, well, this is a Yankee possession. No, he was being rented out by every team that owned him.
Yeah, I mean, think about the amount of teams Juan's been on. It'll be good for him to be on one team for the next decade. He goes from Washington to San Diego to the Yankees, now to the Mets. 4 teams in 3 years, basically, or 4 years technically. So it'll be good for him to have one place. I'm excited to watch him every day. He's an artist at the plate. He's one of the great hitters you'll ever see. He's got deficiencies in his game, which I'm sure we'll talk about. The base running, the defense. We're already bringing up this left field, right field issue, which I think is fascinating. I really do. I think it's an interesting debate based on just the way Citi Field is built, and then factoring in Brandon Nimmo's adjustment. Like, can Brandon Nimmo, who hasn't played right field, make a fair adjustment to right field with a weaker throwing arm? But I think when you look at the way Citi Field is built, especially compared to Yankee Stadium, it makes a lot of sense. And it's certainly something we'll talk about as we get closer to spring training. Now let's get to David Stearns. David Stearns met the media a bunch of days in a row at the winter meetings. What we do here at the Rico Brogna when David speaks, because I think it's important when he speaks. When Juan Soto speaks, it's like, great, he's a Met. Oh, you came here because of family? You came here because of money? Whatever. You're here. We're thrilled. But David Stearns is interesting because we're trying to read the tea leaves on this offseason. So he was answering a lot of questions at the winter meetings. We will listen to everything he had to say. We'll stop it and we'll analyze. And we did get your emails from people saying, hey, can you make the audio quality better? Pete Hoffman has worked his butt off. Hopefully this meets your approval. Ladies and gentlemen, David Stearns.
Wolf spoke earlier, and he referred to Senga as almost on a rehab progression still. I'm just curious what your understanding of where he is at physically is.
Yeah, so he is a healthy player who's progressing through his offseason. He has not begun to throw yet, but that's not necessarily abnormal for Senga as he goes through his offseason. We still expect him to be a pitcher for us on opening day and be ready to go. And if that changes, if we get information that makes us question that, we'll certainly pass it along.
Well, that better not change, because last year was a disaster for Kodai Senga. He did not pitch. He made that one performance against Atlanta where he looked great. Then all of a sudden it looked like he got shot in the leg, and then we saw him pop up again in the postseason. So I am glad that as of right now, middle of December, all is right with Kodai Senga.
Is there anything with him, obviously he barely pitched this past year, innings-wise, that you need to rein him back now versus where he would normally be?
I don't think so. I think when you have that level of bulk over the course of your career, I'm not concerned, and we are not concerned as an organization about getting him back up there as long as he feels good. I mean, one of the main challenges this past year with Senga was even when we were getting him to a point where he was medically in a good shape, he had a challenging time getting his mechanics to where he felt like he could go out and really compete. And so that's going to be part of this process. We have to get not only the medical piece checked off, which I think we will be able to, but we also have to have a pitcher who feels really confident where he is from a mechanical perspective to go out and compete and win games for us.
166 and a third innings. That's what Kodai Senga did in 2023. He obviously follows that up with close to 0. The Mets have been pretty consistent that they don't have innings limits. So even though he's going from 166 to essentially, 14 or whatever that number was in 2024, if you include his minor league work, there isn't going to be, well, we can't go above 155. We can't increase that number way too much. The one thing you heard David Stearns say, and I know this can be very frustrating for fans, frustrating for me, and you jump to other conclusions with it, is that he is so anal and is such a perfectionist about his mechanics that it gives off a vibe of, does he want to pitch? And I don't think that's fair. I think he does want to pitch. I think he wanted to pitch last year, but I think he's one of those guys that knows his body, knows his mechanics, that if things aren't perfect, he doesn't want to go out there because he doesn't think he's going to be effective. And you basically saw that in his start in the National League Championship Series when his mechanics were completely out of whack. So that can be very frustrating as a fan when you hear this isn't right, that isn't right. You almost have this, do you want to pitch? Oh, I think he wants to pitch. I think he's just a perfectionist with everything being right. And then thinking, okay, now I'm going to get the best results.
How much does that uncertainty affect your approach to the rotation this offseason?
I think it accentuates the need for depth, and that's something that we talk about a lot, and the desire to ensure that we have 8 to 10 starting pitchers somewhere in our organization that we feel really confident about that can contribute over the course of the season.
8 to 10 starting pitchers. Right now they're at 7, but I think most of us agree they need more, not depth, but more top-end guys, more certainty, as I like to say. Their depth isn't bad. Like, I think the Mets are going to go into 2025 with actually pretty good starting pitching depth. The problem is they don't have a lot of certainty in this rotation, and that's what David Stearns clearly needs to address.
He also mentioned that you guys were sending somebody to Japan to see Senga right now.
Yes.
Who was that, and what was
this? Is standard practice for us. We send our strength and conditioning coaches and some medical personnel to visit players throughout the offseason. This is the time of year where we're doing that with Senga. So Joe Golia is heading over to Tokyo soon, tomorrow maybe.
So they send guys to check in on their players. Sounds pretty cool. Sounds like a smart thing to do as an organization. Imagine being sent to Japan. It's one thing if you're going to Florida. You're going on a 3-hour plane ride, nice weather. All right. How you doing, Francisco? Oh, good, good. We just wanted to check in on you. All right, we're heading out to Montana. Let's check in on Tyler McGill. I'm kidding. I know he's not from Montana. Brandon Nimmo's from Wyoming. Hey, we're heading to Wyoming. Let's just check in on Brandon Nimmo. Imagine this Joe Golia flying out on like a 22-hour flight to Japan to check out Kodai Senga's doing. Hopefully he gets a vacation out of it. Hopefully he spends more than just a couple of days out there.
Joel was talking about Sasaki. You acknowledged seeing him in Japan, so yes. I thought I might ask. He said he described him as somewhat quiet, and he doesn't necessarily love people who are verbose. Does that give you the verbosity of New York City give you any pause?
So I've not met him, so I can't comment on the personality or what he's like from a conversational perspective. What I can comment on is he's a really talented pitcher, and whoever gets him is going to have a very talented young pitcher going forward. We're certainly going to give it our best shot. Very difficult in these processes to truly understand what a player's preference is. This isn't a normal free agent recruitment process. So we're going to submit our presentations and our materials just like everyone else, and we'll wait for his camp's feedback.
Joel Wolf, he's the agent for Roki Sasaki. It was a little concerning when Joel Wolf made that comment about not being, great with the media and having a bad experience with the media. So it is certainly fair game to say, hey, any concerns about that? You're coming to New York, or potentially you're coming to New York. You're trying to recruit this player to come to New York. Is that some kind of concern? The one kind of area where I think, all right, maybe it's not as bad is I remember Joe and I interviewed Noah Syndergaard when he was a single A player, and he was afraid of the media. I remember him asking us, like, is this live? Are people gonna hear what I'm gonna say? He was very young, didn't know. And obviously, one thing about Noah Syndergaard, say what you want about him, is he grew a lot more comfortable with the media. Roki Sasaki is only 24 years old. So his experience in Japan with the media, it came as a very young player. And so you never know. Maybe as he gets older, that experience won't be as rough, or he'll learn from that experience. But it certainly is a little bit of a red flag when the agent of the player says, hey, he's had a rough time with the media before. He may be better off in a small to mid market. And that's something an agent only says when they know that there's a cap on how much money they can make. Because if there was no cap, if he was in the situation that Yamamoto was in last year, why would you ever say something like that? But because this is a low financial risk, a big market team like the Mets, the Dodgers, the Yankees, they're still going to go after you, because even if things go badly, there isn't much of a financial risk. Let's hear more about Sasaki, because there's a lot of questions about Roki and certainly this entire process.
I don't have a sense from Joel or anybody that he wouldn't want a big market because of what that comment says.
We have not gotten that feedback yet.
Given his timeline, do you almost have to just operate as if you assume you're not going to get him, and if you get him, it's a bonus?
Yes.
You plan to go out there Joel was saying next week, people are going to start going out there. Do you think
we'll find out? I think that's an invitation-only process, and we don't know yet. Okay.
All right, so there's a couple of things on this. Number one, David Stearns gave an answer that makes me feel very good, which is Roki Sasaki, and I made this comment a few Ricos ago. Roki Sasaki needs to be viewed as an added bonus. If you get him and you're the New York Mets, that is fantastic. That is an added bonus. He's a young player. It's a minor league contract. If he is on your team on opening day, freaking amazing. But you cannot operate this offseason thinking, hey, it depends on if I get Sasaki or not. You have to play out the rest of this offseason in terms of adding a starter or two starters under the illusion you're not getting Roki Sasaki. Number one, you're probably not getting Roki Sasaki. The odds just tell you you're not. And number two, it's not going to happen until the middle of January. And the starting pitching market has moved very quickly. So whether it's Sean Manaea or it's a lesser player like Nick Pivetta or it's a higher player like Corbin Burns, there's a really good chance that by the time Sasaki makes that decision in the middle of January, all those guys are off the board. That's number one. Number two, he laid out that this is an invitation-only process, which means while the Mets are putting their bid together and they're preparing their sales pitch, Roki Sasaki can very well go to his agent, Joe Wolf, and eliminate a bunch of teams and say, don't even have these guys come over. I'm already down to 5 teams. I'm only going to consider the Padres, the Dodgers, the Cubs, and the Giants, or whatever that decision is. So the Mets are trying to get past that first round. And Stearns made it clear it's an invitation-only process. Will the Mets get that invitation? There was a report a couple of days ago that his agency really likes Jeremy Hefner. And why wouldn't you? Maybe it's time we start to give Jeremy Hefner credit. Think about the amount of pitchers that have either come here and had success or left and gotten worse. I think I'm going to do an entire Rico about that, by the way. I think we're going to have a Jeremy Hefner edition of the Rico Brogna where we analyze all the guys that came here and got better and the guys that left and got worse. Taijuan Walker is a great example. Think about Taijuan Walker. What the hell happened to him when he went to Philadelphia? Is it the ballpark? Is it Philadelphia? Or was it that Jeremy Hefner was getting the best out of him? We'll keep an eye on Luis Severino and see what happens with him. And this is going to be the ultimate test this year for the Mets because they already brought in 2 guys in Frankie Montas and Clay Holmes, who, if they have good years, how do you not give Jeremy Hefner credit? How do you not say the Met pitching lab may be having something going on? Like it's Dave Duncan from the late 90s, or Leo Mazzoni. Remember Duncan and Mazzoni? You would put any crappy pitcher in Atlanta or St. Louis, and they'd find a way to turn them into good. That's what the Mets are trying to do. It's a little bit of a heat check when you do that with Frankie Montas and Clay Holmes. Am I right?
Do you imagine that we have that guy, we have that next pitching coach that's going to be here for 20 years, that's going to make guys, average guys turn into aces, guys that are below average turn into average starters? Like, that's incredible to think that. And to be honest with you, I never thought that Jeremy Hefner was that special. But again, every regime now, Hefner's the one guy that sticks around.
And there's no reason for David Stearns to have kept him unless they believe in him. And now you got to start looking at the results. That's why I'm not even joking. We really are going to do a Rico in which we examine the impact of Jeremy Hefner, good and bad, because we got to be fair about it. I don't want to just sit here and read off good examples. We got to go through everybody and kind of take a deeper dive on it. But that's what I think a lot of us are going to learn this year. That's why when the Mets signed Montas and Clay Holmes, the first reaction is, oh my God, Frankie Montas or Clay Holmes as a starting pitcher. But the Mets and Jeremy Hefner did such wonders this past year with what they got out of Minaya and what they got out of Severino. And even before that, when you look at guys like Taijuan Walker, that this is a little bit of a heat check for them. But here's the point. Roki Sasaki is going to want to put himself in a position to be in an organization and with a franchise that gives him the best chance to succeed personally. Because if he can put together 5 good years, 6 good years, he will then get to regular free agency. And if he gets to regular free agency as a 30-year-old, which I think is what his age will be when he gets to your regular free agency, and he's put together some really good years, you're looking at, you see these contracts, $250 million. So when Sasaki makes that decision, more so than where he wants to live, or more so than even winning, isn't it going to be, where can someone maximize me? Where can I be my best? Where can I dominate? Where can I learn? Where can I grow? Because if you do all that, think about the money that comes your way once you get to free agency.
How unique of an opportunity is that when you have somebody who's going to be coming here as an international free agent, but is
subject to the bonus pools?
Yeah, but also of a guy that is like a $300 million talent essentially, but for that price. I mean, does that make it more hotly contested, or how do you view that?
Sure, I think all 30 clubs are going to do their best to demonstrate to the player through a PowerPoint presentation or video why their situation is the right one. And all 30 clubs are going to be doing it with a little bit of a blind spot in terms of fully understanding what is motivating the player, what the player is looking for. And so we'll do our best. But it's certainly an attractive opportunity, not only for us, but the other 29 clubs.
Yeah, and to speaking on that, that's why what I would lean into if I'm the New York Mets, and maybe they are, is how they can make Sasaki better. I would lean into Hefner. I would lean into the success they've had with pitchers over the last few years. I would lean in maybe a little bit to the history of pitching in Met history. The Mets as a franchise, we get mocked for what we've accomplished as a franchise. We got some great pitchers. And while Roki Sasaki may not be familiar with their work, make him familiar with his work. Make him familiar with Tom Seaver and Doc Gooden and Jacob deGrom and all the brilliant pitching performances this franchise has ushered in. I know that has nothing to do with Sasaki, but I guess I would lean in towards, we can get the best out of you. Jeremy Hefner can help you grow. Our pitching lab is kick-ass. Look at the success we've had recently. And oh, by the way, while other franchises have a great history of championships, we have a great history of pitching. Look at all our Cy Youngs.
You said a few teams put the presentations in the Dropbox or whatever already. You guys, did you get in? Did you submit?
We have our presentation, and it is either in his hands or on the way. Yes, we will be sure that our presentation is in front of Roki at the right time.
Oh boy, we're all fascinated by this presentation. Tell me more, David Stearns. Tell me more about this presentation.
What do you highlight with stuff like that?
I think we highlight a variety of different things. The first is who we are as an organization, what we believe in, what we think maybe makes us a little bit unique compared to other teams he might be considering. We highlight the various services we can provide for a player. We highlight our familiarity with transitioning Japanese starter to the major league schedule. We highlight our pitching apparatus, our health apparatus, our nutrition apparatus. We want him to know that we have the resources and we have the ability to make this transition as smooth as possible.
As he was talking about all these apparatuses, I kept thinking about what apparatuses they had when the Wilpons were around. I don't think they had any of those apparatuses. So it's a different world, fellow Met fans. It's a different world.
How much stronger for both?
Point taken.
How much stronger do you think that pitch is this year after the season you just had, and you having had a year under your belt to make that pitch now than it would have been maybe last year?
I think I have a better understanding of what, as an organization, distinguishes us a little bit, and so we can highlight those things.
I think what helps is probably the experience of success with starting pitchers that were coming off bad years. I would think that probably helps more than just the experience of Yamamoto, because even though there are some similarities, you have the language barrier, you're trying to get a player over from Japan. One of the big differences, you don't have the money. Like with Yamamoto, you could offer him $300 million, which is exactly what the Mets did. In the case of Sasaki, everybody's offering basically the same thing. The Pittsburgh Pirates, and by the way, if I'm the Pirates, I'm all over this. Imagine that rotation for the next 5 years. I'd be trying. That's what I'd be selling them on. Look at this young rotation for the next 5 years. Skeens and Sasaki. Let's go. The double S's. But I would think that the experience of last year's success may actually help in the selling process.
How would that work, having two guys in the rotation that would need an extra day or potentially need an extra day?
I think once you have one guy in the rotation who needs the extra day, adding the second isn't, especially when someone of this caliber, isn't a particular challenge. You're already more or less committing going to that 6-man rotation. It's not like adding a second makes you go to the 7-man rotation. So I think we're okay with it.
Yeah, it probably makes it easier because so many.
How would that work, having two guys
pitching on their normal
in the rotation that would
now have another
extra
guy that's an extra rest guy, the way Senga is, probably makes things easier. I'm under the impression the Mets are going to have a 6-man rotation basically the entire year anyway because of the Senga factor. So I think in Sasaki's case, it doesn't matter at all.
You guys do the presentation in Japanese?
Yes.
Is the grimace in the presentation?
that is a great question. I don't believe Grimace made. I can't believe I'm answering that question. I don't believe that Grimace made an appearance in the Roki Sasaki presentation.
Thank you, Mike. It's a copyright issue.
Yeah. If we don't get the player, we now know why. Yes.
Yeah. Now we know. You got to take advantage of this, David. Grimace was a big part of the success last year. How was Grimace not in the presentation? Just remember this. Gimmicks only last 1 year. All right? So whether it was Mojo Rising in 1999 or Who Let the Dogs Out in 2000 or Grimace and OMG in 2024, there needs to be newness in 2025. It never works if you take the same gimmick and you try to stretch it out over a second season.
Yeah, but what if Sasaki wants to be like the next like Japanese star as far as like music goes? Like we can create that. You can create a song. You know, I mean, it's not a bad idea.
Well, I think Iglesias needs to come out with another song. First of all, the Mets need to re-sign Iglesias. Let's start there. He needs to be on the team. Number two, he's going to have to come out with another song, and the song's going to have to be as catchy. I mean, OMG was a really good song. It wasn't just that the Mets played well and we all loved the song. It was a catchy song. So a lot of things are going to have to work out for us to have more gimmicks in 2025.
I'm a music guy, so you don't know the pressure of artists. There's a lot of one-hit wonders out there for a reason. Let's just put it that.
No, I understand. All right, so we've got a lot on Roki Sasaki, that's for sure. I feel like I've learned nothing, though. No, I've learned a little bit. I've learned that David Stearns has absolutely no idea if they're even going to be a semifinalist for him, but they're going to try.
Holmes now announced, how did the discussions develop in the
interest of him as a starter?
Yeah, so we first talked to them, I think it was when we were at the GM meetings, and we're talking about a variety of different things. Our team needs, our really belief in Clay as a pitcher, familiarity that Carlos Mendoza had with him, and BB Abbott, his agent, said to me, he has long wanted a chance to go back to starting. Do you think that's possible? And I said, yeah, we think that's possible, and we're going to do a lot more work on it, and we did. And we had multiple discussions with Clay directly about it. Jeremy Hefner talked to Clay. We had our medical staff discuss with Clay what this would look like, and I think we all came away believing, this is a real possibility, and we could get this player to a point where he's going to be a very good major league starter, and he was very motivated to do that. We were able to work out a deal.
So it's the agent. It's the agent saying to David Stearns, hey, any interest in Clay Holmes as a starter? And David's like, I think we may, especially because it's going to be a lot cheaper than signing any other starting pitcher. And we don't really like to spend big time money and big time years on starting pitching. But let's go in the lab. Let's see what we got. All right. Got a pretty good sinker, got a pretty good slider, got a pretty good sweeper. Maybe we could develop a four-seamer or bring back your old changeup that you had. Sure, why the hell not? And then the discussions go deeper.
In your mind, is this, an experiment with the fallback option of being a reliever for you, or is this you're signed Clay Holmes? He's in your rotation.
He's in our rotation. Yeah, we believe he's a starter. If for some reason that doesn't work, we know he's an effective reliever. But he is coming here because he wants to start. We believe he's a starter, and he's going to get every opportunity to do that.
All right, so that's a very important question and a very important answer. What that tells you is the idea that the Mets could fall into two more starting pitchers and then move Clay Holmes to the bullpen before he ever attempts to start a game is not happening. They have told Clay Holmes, you're a starting pitcher. Clay Holmes signed with the Mets with the understanding he was going to be a starting pitcher. So any of these fantasies that we may have that this is a project that never gets off the ground, that's not happening. He's going to be a starting pitcher. Now, what David Stearns keeps open-ended is a fallback option of moving him back to the bullpen. Well, how bad would he have to be as a starting pitcher? Or how bad would the Met bullpen have to be for the Mets to change course? Especially when they told the player, you're coming here as a starting pitcher. What that tells me is things would have to go really bad. Like, you're talking about 6 ERA or 5 ERA, or you're talking about an August-September decision if this team is in a pennant race or they're about to go to the playoffs, and it's like, hey, you're used to coming out of the bullpen. Let's make that switch, but it's temporary. We're trying to win this year. We'll move you back into the rotation in year 2. So it does sound like the Mets are very committed to Clay Holmes, the starting pitcher. That's certainly what I took out of that.
How long do you think it's going to take them to stretch him out to get to, say, a 6th or 7th inning?
I don't think it's going to take any time at all. I think that's what spring training is for. Like, I think you're basically starting over. So I think because this is a process that's starting in spring training, I don't know if he's ever going to be a 7-inning pitcher. I mean, who is a 7-inning pitcher in Major League Baseball? But as a 5-inning guy or even a 6-inning guy on a day in which he's pitching really well, I got to tell you, Hoff, I think it's right away. I think that's the beauty of being stretched out through spring training. I don't think it's a gradual process.
Well, I mean, listen, if that's the case, then I guess, we always talk about it. If he can go 5 innings and give up 3 runs tops, maybe 4, I mean, that's the range you want so you could be competitive in a game. You just don't want to get blown up every day. You don't want to have those 7-inning running innings,
I think what's going to be challenging, and it doesn't mean the Mets are going to do anything about it, but it's going to be challenging for us, is that if he's a back of the rotation arm, which is basically what you described, 5-inning pitcher, he keeps you in the game, he's pitching to a low to mid 4 ERA, he's a fine back of the rotation arm. It is a worthy debate to say, isn't he more valuable as a lockdown 7th or 8th inning guy who can pitch double to triple the amount of time and fill a very important role? And I think that's going to be the debate. Like, if Clay Holmes is dominant, there is no debate. Like if Clay Holmes looks like Reynaldo Lopez or Seth Lugo, then it's like, cool, we got ourselves this top of the rotation gem. My God, the Mets are geniuses. This is fantastic. But if he's mid or back of the rotation level, it's fair to say, sure, he's fine, but wouldn't he be more valuable as a late inning reliever?
Well, that's also going to rely upon how the bullpen's doing. If the bullpen's doing lights out, you can experiment more with Clay Holmes. If the bullpen, if you have like last year with Edwin Diaz being suspended for 10 days, with Drew Smith's injury, and just a bunch of other things that went down, like who's the lefty? Riley?
Brooks Raley.
Brooks Raley, thank you. Him going down, like, dude, legitimate. You might have had to just say, Clay, you got to go back to a bullpen role because necessity.
I don't think they're going to do it, though. Like that vibe from that answer is they're not going to panic in June, because that's what we're talking about. That's when this was going down in May and June. They're not going to panic in May and June and say, screw it, you're a relief pitcher. Like they are committed based on that answer to Clay Holmes, the starting pitcher, as much as we may not like it. Let's hear more about Clay Holmes from David Stearns.
What are the pieces of him that make you think he can do that?
So first is I think the desire to do that. The arsenal should work against both sides of the plate. He has, we think, the variety of stuff to turn over a lineup multiple times, and you start adding all of those up, and that leads you to believe like this could be an effective major league starter. I think the usage is probably going to have to change a little bit. He may have to introduce some new stuff that we believe he can do. And you know, if he's able to do that, I think we're going to have someone who's going to be a very solid contributor in our rotation.
He used to throw a curveball. In fact, if you go back to 2020, he threw a curveball 60% of the time. Then he shelved it after the 2021 season. He's got a four-seamer that he barely throws. He's got a changeup that he also used to throw years ago. He's got a curveball I mentioned who he used to throw. So he's got a few in the bag. He's going to have to bring one back. There's no question, to become that four-pitch pitcher. And hopefully he develops it. And that'll help be the key on getting guys out a second time around or third time around and see if he can be an effective starting pitcher. One thing that gives me hope, there's two things that give me hope about this working. Number one is this is a trend now in Major League Baseball. We have seen a handful of relievers, whether it's Reynaldo Lopez or Jordan Hicks or Seth Lugo, make that conversion and be it effectively. And number two is the trust that we're now starting to gain in Jeremy Hefner and this pitching lab.
Were you surprised 60 or 70?
Brought that up?
Was I surprised
when BB said he was interested in starting?
Not necessarily. I think in this day and age with relievers who continue to refine what they do, frankly, with the pitch design resources that all these guys have in front of them, I think there are, frankly, a number of relievers that have considered converting, especially those who had started previously in their careers. So, no, it didn't shock me.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, this is now becoming a trend where we're seeing more relievers have that desire and want to become a starting pitcher, not only because they think they could do it, but because if they can do it, they're going to make a crap load of money. All you got to do is look at the market for starting pitching. If you can just be decent, you will get paid.
What's a reasonable expectation for innings after he's only pitched 60 to 70 the past few years?
Yeah, so we talked about this a ton, and like we don't have innings limits, and we talked about this last year with some of our younger pitchers. We don't believe in it. What we do believe in is constant monitoring, baselining, and regular check-ins with the pitcher. So we are not going into this with a set innings goal. We're going to make sure he stays strong and healthy. And if we begin to see signs that we need to take our foot off the accelerator a little bit, we will. But until that point, we're planning on him being a normal starter.
That's one of the trends in baseball that's now gone. The innings limit really is gone. What you're getting a lot more of is, hey, we're just going to see if anything's changing mechanically and if that's a sign of him being tired. But these innings limits, which never made sense, does not exist. So Clay Holmes, if he pitches well as a starting pitcher, he'll get to continue to pitch and pitch and pitch, which is a good thing, because if he's a success, who the hell wants to see him shut down for a couple of weeks or be limited?
You
Is two-seam, four-seam, and his sweeper slider enough, or does he need another off-speed pitch?
I think he's going to work on a couple of different types of things. I mean, I think in the introduction of a changeup, which he's comfortable doing, could make some sense. But until we actually start seeing what this looks like going through a lineup multiple times, it's probably going to be an evolving process.
I don't think there's any doubt he's going to have to develop a fourth pitch. And like we mentioned, he has experience with some of these. He just put a few of them in the bag when he became this lockdown reliever and really focused on the sweeper, slider, and sinker.
Seems like a deeper than normal starting pitching class at free agency. How have you found it inventory-wise in terms of the trade market? What's could reasonably be moved?
The starting pitching. There are certainly starting pitchers who are being discussed on the trade market. I would expect, multiple starting pitchers to be. I don't know how to quantify it, but multiple starting pitchers to be moved in the coming weeks. And so there is, I think, both a reasonable quantity in the free agent market and starting pitchers available through trade.
All right, I want to stop right there, and and this name we've talked about. Okay, so this is not a brand new name. I'm not splitting an atom here, but I have become more and more enamored with one specific starting pitcher that I want the New York Mets to trade for. And we've talked about him before, but the more I think about it, the more I see the market, the more you see free agency develop. Luis Castillo is the target. He's the target for a myriad of reasons. Number one, David Stearns is telling us he doesn't want to give out long-term contracts to starting pitchers. He'll do it if the guy's 25 and coming over from Japan. But for the most part, they didn't talk about Max Fried. They didn't talk about Blake Snell. They're not talking about Corbin Burns. One of the risks of even engaging on Dylan Cease is that he's a free agent at the end of the year. What do you think is going to happen then? Luis Castillo is perfect. Luis Castillo is perfect because I think he fits everything this franchise needs. Number one, let's start with what David Stearns needs. David Stearns doesn't want to hand out a long-term contract. Well, Luis Castillo has a very reasonable deal. He signed in 25, 26, and 27. That's a 3-year deal. He's making about $24.5 million a year, which is unbelievable. For a guy who's 32, in fact, he turned 32 on December 12th. Happy birthday, Luis Castillo. 32, 33, 34, 3-year deal, $25 million a year for a guy who basically is a lockdown 170, 180 inning kind of guy. For a guy who at times has pitched like an ace, that's a freaking steal. The 4th year would only vest if he throws enough innings. Okay, throw enough innings. I'll give you a 4th year. So from the David Stearns perspective, how does he not love that contract? That's number one. Number two, for a guy like me who just wants certainty in this rotation, last year, 30 starts, 175 innings. The year before that, 33 starts, 197 innings. The year before that, he made 25 starts, a little bit down for him, 150 innings, but pitched really, really well. Year before that, 33 starts, 187 innings. He has been as certain a starting pitcher as any in Major League Baseball over the last 5 years. So that gives the certainty that this rotation needs. Then you talk about the ace factor. Luis Castillo has pitched like an ace at times. Maybe not last year, but 2 years ago he did. 3 years ago he did. So now it comes down to how do you make this work with Seattle? The Mariners need offense. They want Major League ready offense. Would it be worth one of the very close Major League talents like a Luis Angel Acuna? I think it would be. I think it would be. I think it would be worth as much as I wouldn't want to trade a Jet Williams. You're talking about a guy on a reasonable contract, a guy that you can get 3 to 4 really solid years out of, and a guy who gives the Mets something this pitching staff desperately needs. Certainty. And I know that's tough to get in Major League Baseball with starting pitchers in 2025, but I think Luis Castillo gives you a lot of that. There's been some rumors about him to Boston in a Tristan Casas kind of trade. I know the Mets don't exactly have that to match up with Seattle, but I'd be on the phone with them because the Mets do need to add a starting pitcher or two, and Nick Pivetta doesn't do it for me. Nick Pivetta is a back of the rotation arm, and quite frankly, the Mets have a lot of back of the rotation arms. They need someone you can slot in towards the top, And I think Luis Castillo is that. We'll hear more from David Stearns in our next edition of Rico Brogna. We're Ricoing every day. We're getting nuts. We're going to need some kind of vacation at some point. But right now, Hoff and I are committed to it. We're committed to the Rico. And we will listen to more from David Stearns on our next edition of Rico Brogna, in which he'll answer a lot more questions about all different aspects of this team. We do appreciate you listening and downloading. Of course, rate and subscribe and download the Rico Brogna wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, anytime you want to interact with us, you can email us, thericob@gmail.com, thericob@gmail.com. Thank you very much for listening, hanging out with us on another edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.